Hi guys, Mr. Fraser here from NeonMaths. Bright maths, bright future. Today we're going to be doing a session on the basics of algebra. So this will suit you if you're a student taking on algebra for the first time, or if you're a more advanced student looking at refreshing and recapping on some of the basics. In this session, we're going to be looking at when we use algebra. We're going to be examining and discussing some of the terminology that we use, as well as looking at the difference between the rules when we add and subtract and when we multiply and divide. A lot of people hate algebra. For me, it's my favourite part of maths. Stick with me, like this video, comment below, subscribe to my channel, and I'll show you why.
Tables getting hard, go harder, think smarter. Bruce Lee said, be like water. Tough times make us tougher. My mama ain't raised no sucker. I ain't scared of math struggles. I love it when I learn.
This is Algebra, the basics. Algebra follows all of the same rules that apply to general arithmetic. In algebra, we use letters to represent unknown numbers. Now, there are a few key words that we need to get to grips with. They are variable, expression, constant, and equation. Now, algebra follows all of the same rules as arithmetic. In algebra, we use letters to represent unknown numbers. And we call these letters variables. So, I have a packet of sweets here. I don't know how many sweets there are in this packet, but I'm going to use a variable to represent the number of sweets in this packet. I'm going to use the letter X. In maths, we can use any letter, but generally speaking, you tend to see A, B, and C, and X, Y, and Z. Don't ask me why. So, I don't even like these. Here you go, you have them. If I asked you to go ahead and eat 4 sweets, we would be able to represent that using X minus 4. Now, as I mentioned earlier, X, it's the unknown. It can be any number, and we call that the variable. The minus 4 bit is the constant. That doesn't change. We call that the constant. Now, together, these make an algebraic expression. So, an algebraic expression can be made up of one or more variables and constants. If I asked you then to go ahead and count the amount of sweets that were left in the bag, we could add some more information to this. We would now know that the total number of sweets minus 4 sweets is, let's say, 10. This is an equation. The difference between our expression earlier and our equation was in our expression, our variable could have been any number. Whereas now we know that they add up to 10, we can calculate exactly what X is. Those are our 4 key words. We have our variable, we have our constant. If we've just got a variable and a constant, we call that an expression. If we know that it equals something, it is an algebraic equation. We can solve this. So we know that our full packet of sweets must have had 14 sweets in them. Now we're going to talk about the rules for adding and subtracting with algebra and multiplying and dividing. So we're going to start off by looking at the rules that we need to follow when adding and subtracting with algebra. Now there's one very important thing that we need to remember, and that is in algebra we can only add and subtract like terms. Okay, so what are like terms? This is an example of an algebraic expression that we can simplify by adding. Both parts contain a's. These are like terms. So we can add 2a plus 3a equals 5a. Here's another example of a subtraction question that involves like terms. Now, there's a very common mistake that's made here, and that's forgetting that there's actually a secret number in front of the c. We don't tend to write the 1 in front of it. In fact, if we wanted to write 1x, we would just write x, 1z, z, and in this case, we're talking about c. But we need to remember that what it actually means is 1c. So in this question, they're both like terms, so I can perform the subtraction. I'm doing 4c take away 1c, and 4c take away 1c is 3c. So you must remember that in maths, in algebra, we can only add and subtract like terms. What are non-like terms? Well, something like this, 2x plus 3y. We couldn't simplify that. Another example of non-like terms might be something like 2x plus 3x. 3x squared. Now, it's very easy to make a mistake between these two, thinking that they're like terms, but you must remember that x plus x squared, those aren't like terms, so we can't simplify it any further. Remember, when adding and subtracting, we can only add and subtract like terms. Okay, so multiplying and dividing with algebra, well, we don't need to follow the same rules. Unlike with adding and subtracting, we can multiply or divide any number. Now I group them together in adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing because the same rules apply to both of those. Okay, so here's an example of an algebraic expression which we need to multiply. Now, in this case, we just need to multiply the numbers together. In maths, we call those numbers the coefficients, the numbers before the letters are the coefficients. We multiply the coefficients together. 2 times 3 is 6, and a times a, well, when we multiply a number by itself, we use exponents, we use indices. A multiplied by a is a squared. Okay, here's another example. Now you'll notice that in this example we're multiplying a's and b's together. That's okay. We do exactly the same thing. We multiply our coefficients, our numbers before the letters. 2 times 3 is 6. And a multiplied by b. Well, when we multiply unknowns together, we just need to write them next to each other. A times b is the same as ab. So 2a multiplied by 3b is the same as 6ab. Okay, we're going to make this a little bit more difficult, and we're going to introduce negatives and positives, which we're going to need to multiply together. Now, the rules for this follow exactly the same rules that we would in general arithmetic. So, if I had a question like this, 3x times negative 2y. Well, in order to be able to solve this, I need to know my rules for multiplying and dividing positive and negative numbers. So here we have the rules for multiplying and dividing positive and negative numbers. If we multiply a positive number by a positive number, you know this. What's 2 times 3? Well, a positive times a positive is a positive solution, so 2 times 3 is positive 6. If we were to multiply a positive and a negative number together, well, something like 2 times negative 3, well, we would get a positive times a negative, which will give us a negative solution. A negative times a positive is a negative, and a negative multiplied by another negative is a positive. Now, there are different ways of remembering this, but probably the easiest way is to think that if the signs are the same and we're multiplying the two numbers together, then there's a positive solution. So a positive times a positive is a positive, a negative times a negative is a negative, whereas if the signs are different, we get a negative solution. So here is an example of a question that we need to know this rule for. 3x times negative 2y. Well, a positive multiplied by a negative gives me a negative, and 3 multiplied by 2 is 6, and x multiplied by y is xy. Okay, so we need to be really careful that we don't confuse the rules for adding and subtracting with the rules for multiplying and dividing. Remember, when we add and subtract in algebra, we can only add and subtract like terms. When we're multiplying or dividing, there are different rules that apply. So this is Mr. Fraser from NeonMaths. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, please like, please comment. The work that we've covered today, these basic skills are going to be very important in your mathematical career, and getting to grips with them early is very important to be a successful mathematician. Good luck.